Good. Good to see ya.
Good to see you
Uh,
too.
All right, everybody. So today we're going to have Steven talking to us. I think he's one of those rare leaders who's done a little bit of everything. From leading billion-dollar deals at teams like Oracle and Dell to co-founding a consulting firm that worked with a quarter of the Fortune 500. These days, he's helping tech and AI companies grow smarter and faster as a fractional exec and advisor. And what I love about Steven is that he doesn't just talk about business strategy, he connects it to people and purpose. We're going to dig into scaling, leadership, and how to build momentum things when it gets tough. We're super excited to have you here. So start off with kind of your story. How did you get into the career where you're at now and tell us about where you're at?
Fantastic. Happy to. So before I jump in, I dropped into the chat everything I'm going to tell you today. So that's kind of a bold move because then what people usually do is say, "Wow, okay, I got it," and then they check out. But what I tend to do is I cover a lot, and so in order to give time for questions, I put it all into a Word document. Every time we do this, I update it. So there's some stuff in the new document that I learned from the last time I did the academy, and so this document essentially gets better over time. So a little bit about me before we jump in. It's in block one of the document. And I started my career in the Air Force as a contracting officer, but I never say that. I say I negotiated for the US government because a contracting officer creates the confusion in most people's minds that I was an officer. I wasn't, I was enlisted. In that unique military sort of way, we have language that we use that's very easy for us to understand, but we have to sanitize and then tune it for other people. Everybody knows what a negotiator is. Nobody outside the military knows what a contracting officer is. So you're going to run into very similar points. One of the things you'll see over and over in the document, and I'm going to say over and over again, is I'm pretty cynical. I've hired hundreds of people, but I've interviewed thousands, both in the US, Europe, and in India. So the thing that I've learned is that my military background did not prepare me for the first big civilian job. We'll touch on that in a bit. But I went from the military into oil and gas, into dot-coms, into Dell, and then from Dell through a gaming company to a couple more startups, and then Oracle. Oracle, I was responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and all the negotiations and all the business practices for the big software company. After I left Oracle, I spent the last 10 years running my own business, a seven-figure consulting firm that does business with 25% of the Fortune 500, defending them from Oracle. So it's a nice thing where you go create a problem and then you move into another business and solve the problem you created in the big company you just left. So I left that company a couple years ago. In startup terms, I exited, which means very amicable, very friendly exit. Company's still there, but I wanted to do other stuff. And so what I do today is I lead business development for AI organizations and a couple of aerospace companies. So that's a little bit about me and kind of my journey. The thing you'll find is that when I talk about my exit from the military, my last year in the military, I was negotiating contracts with Nobel Prize winning scientists. I was responsible for all contract activity from London to Land's End in the UK as the only military contracting officer. But when I got my DD 214, it said contracts craftsman, which meant absolutely nothing to anyone who ever looked at it. So if I had put that on my resume, I would have been in a lot of trouble. So what I can do, Kylie, is I can kind of go through the framework, or you and I can have a conversation back and forth, however you want to do it.
No, absolutely. I was just looking over what you put in the chat, and I would love for you to go over what you intended. It all looks super great.
Awesome, awesome. So I throw the quick hits at the top because I know
Yeah.
usually I go during lunchtime and I lose a lot of people. So I put the quick hits because these are the things I'm going to say that are usually the most controversial. So if anybody has a question you want to ask, by all means, drop it into the chat. And Kylie, if you can kind of help me, because I tend to look at
Yeah,
myself on the screen because I love
absolutely.
watching myself. But so the first item that nobody likes to hear is resumes are dead. Resumes are dead for mid-career people. Um, Back in the day, I would get a stack of resumes when I was hiring somebody. I would manually go through those resumes and I'd come out with a couple of dozen people I wanted to learn more about. That died years ago. It really died during COVID. What killed it was two things: bad job descriptions that do not talk about the job that actually needs to be done, because writing a new job description is a nightmare. So when I was at Fortune 100 companies, one of the job descriptions I wrote at a Fortune 100 company 20 years ago is still there, word for word, as the job description. Do you think things have changed in 20 years? Yeah,
Absolutely.
a lot. But it is a nightmare to go back and redo it. But here's the problem. Back in the day, that didn't matter because people would ignore the job description and go through the resumes. Well, now what happens is the job description informs ATS, the applicant tracking system, or it informs the offshore teams that are going through looking for people, or more often now, it informs the AI. AI is only as good as the bad information it gets. So, what I tell my clients as an executive coach is that your resume belongs at the end of the job hunting process if you're mid-career or later. Early career, first job out of college, fine. That's a diploma. That's a mill. People crank through it. But all of you, if you have more than 4 years in the military, you are largely considered to be mid-career, even if you're starting a brand new career because of your age and your experience. It sort of calibrates where people put you. So I'm going to pause there to see if anybody has a question about that. Nice. The second thing that really irritates people when I say it is never say you're retired. And that really angers people because in the military, we see retirement as the honorable conclusion to successful service. In the civilian world, they see retirement as you want to sit on the beach with a Mai Tai and earn income from two different sources. They do not understand retirement as a badge of honor. Everybody in the civilian world hears retirement and thinks you're moving to Florida. So when I talk to people about their military service, especially when we're talking here, I'll say, I completed my service. I'm ready for a new challenge. I'm doing something different. But I don't say I'm retired. So the other key is that the R word can create confusion because 90+% of people you're going to talk to have never, ever really encountered the military, especially when you start talking to mid to senior executives at companies. I've been to a conference with 250 people, 4 veterans. These are directors and above. And so the challenge there is most of my career has been spent in tech, software, AI, cloud, but also in financial services, in a couple of other industry groups. So as you're looking at where you're going, it really affects the language that you use. That gets into my third point. Assume that people have no military knowledge. The other key, though, is some people are salty about that. There's always this nagging fear in the back of people's minds that they really should have served, particularly people who came of age right around 9/11. And it can actually tilt some of their perceptions so they react more negatively than you would expect to some of the things you say. So it's usually worthwhile to either record yourself or use our friends at ChatGPT to get an idea of what something would sound like to somebody who either doesn't know anything about the military or has a slight negative bias. Because the whole point here is to get an opportunity to get work. It's not to win an argument about whether or not they should serve. All right, I'm talking really fast. Just a little feedback real quick. Is this the right pace to keep y'all awake for lunch?
I think so. For me, what does everyone else think? Does anybody have anything for Steven yet? Oh, we got a couple thumbs up in the chat.
Okay, cool.
We're
Yeah,
liking what we're hearing.
yep. If I start going too fast, let me know. But again, I realize this is the hour for multitasking, so I want to respect that and give as much value as I can. The fourth thing, I have worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies that always pigeonholed military. So what do I mean by that? They knew that the people in the military really wanted to go work for that company. But they also knew that people in the military didn't exactly understand what people in the civilian world were paid for the same level of service. So people would come in out of the military essentially a year or two behind in salary progression where they would have come in if they'd come in from the civilian workforce. So the thing I usually say is if you are interviewing with people who do not have a military background, this doesn't matter. But if you're interviewing with a company that hires a lot of military, you have a responsibility to understand your value and communicate it. Otherwise, they would have looked at me and they would have seen contracts craftsman. Oh, I know what that is. He should be in supply. He should be negotiating for ladders, And so I would have gotten pigeonholed. So just watch out for that, particularly if you go to work for one of the companies that's a defense contractor or others. Make sure you understand your value and where somebody would come in from the civilian side doing the same job. And don't ask them. Remember, I've interviewed thousands of people. The interviewer has no obligation to be honest with you. It's a lot like don't ever talk to a cop. Yeah, because the cop doesn't have to be honest with you. When the interviewer is talking to you, follow the old rule of journalism, which was your mother says she loves you. Check it out. That's on you. And so that's again, it's a little cynical, but it will save you a lot of money, because the other thing that a lot of people in the military don't understand about the civilian workforce is if you go from your first job, you've been there 2 years and you realize you went in too low. So you try to jump to another company and get the job you should have gotten from the outset. Most companies have a rule that they will not pay you more than 5 to 10% above last year's W-2. So if you go from company A to company B and you say, I want to double my pay because that's what I should have gotten, they say, yeah, I understand that. But our rule is we don't give more than a 10% bump off your last job. And so, as you can see, people kind of get stuck behind through the rest of their career from those early decisions trying to get that first job. Again, this is pretty cynical stuff, but the thing to remember is I'm Gen X and we're feral. So I have a tendency to kind of tell people the way it is. So if anything in here is really offensive or bothers you, you've got my email in the document. By all means, hit me. Point E, don't translate downwards. This drives me nuts. I was in a transition class a couple of years ago that actually led me to start volunteering for this stuff. And I'm listening to the well-meaning person on stage who had never in their life hired anyone. And in fact, I found out later, had never had to interview for a job. But that person was the one giving advice. And one of the people in the class said, yeah, I'm the executive officer on a Navy destroyer. How should I talk about my service? And the person said, you should talk about how you ran a branch office for a large corporation. Now, there are two problems with that. One is nobody has branch offices anymore. Ew, that's a terrible term. But the second and more damning thing was you're making life and death decisions for yourself and a couple of hundred other people. You're doing a lot more than what Steve Carell's character did on The Office. All right. So the challenge we face as we look at our military service is not translating downwards. The other thing to remember about the military culture is, except in the Air Force, by and large, we don't talk ourselves up. We talk ourselves down because we don't want to be perceived as being cocky or arrogant. In the Air Force, I didn't do that. But the thing to I'm joking, but the thing to realize is everybody in the civilian side talks themselves up. They start with what they can do and shine a really positive light on it. In the military, if you do that, bad things happen. So we tend to start with what we can do and underplay it a little bit. So that's the key. Don't translate your own self downwards because you're talking down your own capabilities. If you're using AI, a great way to do it, and this is one of the points of feedback I got last time, everybody tells you how to use, that you should use AI. Nobody tells you how. The thing to do with AI is say something and then let it push back and challenge you, and then say it again. I find Grok is a better one for that than ChatGPT. ChatGPT wants to be your friend, but Grok, you can tell it, hey, I want you to pretend that you are the AI of an eccentric billionaire and don't care what I think. And then it will push back really hard. So don't translate downward. Now, this leads to point F, which really irritates a lot of people. Leadership is undervalued, particularly in larger corporations. Leadership is hugely valuable in small corporations, but remember, in the civilian world, we generally conflate leadership and management as the same thing. And the old expression when I was in the military was you manage things, you lead people. And despite years of leadership books and seminars and all that kind of stuff, in the civilian world, leadership generally means the bold decision to move forwards. Most big corporations value consensus, that we all agree that's the direction. So getting along is more important than leading. And when you're interviewing for a job and they ask you, what are your leadership skills? Talk a lot about how you were able to build a consensus around your idea and move forward. Don't ever say, I worked in an organization, everybody was an idiot but me, and I had to force everyone in the right direction. It is amazing how many times I interview people who've been out of the military for years and still use examples about when everybody was wrong, but I was right and I led. And you know what? That's a valid leadership perspective, but most people in the civilian world don't know how to calibrate it.
Stephen,
All
will
right.
we have a little moment? I know there's a lot of knowledge getting thrown out, and there's a couple people with questions, so I just want to get to
Yep.
them so they can ask their questions on your first point before we keep moving.
That will be a
Kate?
lot better because if I talk, I'm going to end up sounding like an auctioneer by the end of it. So
Absolutely. Kate, go ahead.
Hi, Stephen. My name's Kate. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Just a quick question when you had mentioned to not undervalue yourself. I just had a really great conversation with a professional in the field that I'm looking at getting into, which is IT program management. And he also expressed the same thing, which I feel that I have been guilty of, which is undervaluing myself by looking at lower level positions, and he said that that can actually backfire against you if you undervalue, what you bring to the table. So my question for you is, do you believe that if we feel or we meet the experience criteria for a position, like IT program management, do you think that it makes more sense to go for that versus taking a lower level role that we might have a greater chance of getting hired on, but like you said, kind of getting pigeonholed?
okay, that's a terrific question. And again, I'm going to give you my opinion. Everything I'm going to tell you runs up against how badly do you need a job. Everybody has a mortgage to pay, everybody's got. But the thing I always say is I would rather get no job than the wrong job. And it is virtually impossible to get promoted inside large organizations because they do something called lateral fast tracking. And this has been going on for 15, 20 years. The traditional idea is you go from worker to supervisor to manager to director to VP. Nobody's done that for years. What you have to do is lateral fast tracking, where you're a worker in one department and they say, I'm going to give you a chance to shine. We're going to rotate you to another department with more responsibilities. And you say, so that's a promotion. They say, no, it's the same level. I know people who've been in a company for 12 years and they are still carrying an individual contributor title, but they've been through 4 departments and have quadrupled the amount of value they create. So that's one. So what people generally have to do if they want to get promoted is leave their current company to a different company at the next level up. And so it's ridiculous. I don't defend it, but it is one of those things where, again, what you're coming from the military is both a competency and seniority based model. In the civilian world, seniority sort of doesn't really matter outside of certain occupations or certain union focused jobs. And so the thing I always say is the challenge you run into is you try to claim that level that you actually should be at. The thing you're going to hear is you don't know our industry. You don't know our situation. You don't know this. You don't know that. And we can talk about how you can bridge that gap through your networking. But that's the thing you have to be ready to answer is not so much in a defensive way. Remember, if you're getting the job through networking, the person you're networking with actually knows what you're capable of, and they will explain your capabilities inside their company. And that's a much more powerful way. It sounds like the conversation you had was fantastic. That's a great networking contact who can kind of help you here at company X. This is what we call that. And that's why you then tune your resume, and the resume is a leave behind, not a door opener. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it does make sense. I think one of the things I've been very guilty of is kind of downplaying, like you had mentioned earlier, the role that I have to try to obtain a role. But what I am fearful is what you had mentioned is that you get stuck in those lower level positions, which is, obviously the opposite of what I would, my goal.
Right.
And so I think an approach, like you had said, to take is, it be able to explain the value that you would bring and that the knowledge that you have on whichever industry and to try to defend that route versus, downplaying your capabilities and what you could bring to that company.
Right. You never want to be on the defensive. You want to lead with it. The other thing I tell people is in the military, and kind of to your point, I want to be 110% of the job to apply for it. I want to know I can kill it. But in the civilian world, usually they're going for a job with only 80, 90% of the necessary skills, the necessary capabilities, trusting they'll stretch up. Because remember, 99% of civilian jobs aren't life and death. So there's really no harm in going in with 90% of the skills and stretching up to be able to do the job. So that's the thing to realize. The other thing is there is a personality trait that a lot of people have that they never want to be caught out. Imposter syndrome is a huge thing. If you do not know what it is, you have got to Google it. It is there's a study that says 75% of executives have crippling imposter syndrome. The other 25% are functioning sociopaths. So none of us are real to them anyway, so they don't feel like they're imposters. So that's the thing you're going into. So having some imposter syndrome is normal. My co-founder and I, he was the sociopath. I had the imposter syndrome, so we clicked together really well in our company. And he's proud of that. So he sends me things on how awesome it is to be a sociopath. So thank you for that question. I definitely want to take another one before I jump back in.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up, Stephen, because I think imposter syndrome, I know for me, and I'm sure a bunch of other people in this room are real. Like we are underplaying ourselves, underselling ourselves, not believing that we're gonna get as high as we are. So I'm really glad that you said something like that.
Thanks.
Timothy, hi.
I'm gonna let Derek go first since I think he has to run.
What a nice guy.
I was not ready. I was literally not ready at all.
Maybe not
No,
as
I
nice as
just
we thought.
just out of curiosity though, like we talk about all of these things like, hey, we don't underplay ourselves and stuff like that. But what at what point are you gonna say it's too much? Like where does it draw the line of, being, I mean, obviously if it's the truth, then it's not bragging, right? But how does that fall? Like, how do you portray that without looking like a cocky, butthead?
That's a great point. And the thing we have to realize is people already have a perspective of the military as being very forceful, very sort of overly confident, perhaps. And so you want to be careful of that. The first thing is, and I think the last point was really well made, applying for the right level. Even if you're going to get told no a lot, I'd rather get 100 no's. Well, actually, I'd rather get 99 no's at the right level and one yes than 100 yeses at the level below. Just because I didn't want a job hunt, I was tired of it. One of the biggest things I work with my clients on that is easy to find is the idea of which stories you tell and tuning the stories
Mm,
to what they need to know. So what I mean by that is you think about the job you want. And then you ask people in your network who do that job, what are the requirements to get a shot at that job? Not what are the requirements to do well at it? What are the requirements to be given a chance? And then you sort of think about, okay, what stories do I have that illustrate my dominance of those requirements? And then when you're networking, you drop those stories into the conversation. So that people say, wow, she's led a big organization or he's been responsible for very complex processes. And then all of a sudden, you start getting introduced at the right level. Because the key is the best person to help you is already inside the company and they'll make the introductions and they become that wingman or wingwoman from going to the bar and trying to get dates where they walk up with you and say, this is Derek, he's amazing, he did this and this. And then you don't look like the cocky jerk, your wingman does. And that's cool because the wingman doesn't want the job. So that's the thing I usually play. It's a trick from, not a trick from negotiation, it's a tactic in negotiation. In negotiations, we don't have tricks, we have tactics. But that can be really valuable, having somebody else sing your praises in the introduction. That help? Cool.
thanks, Derek. All right, back to you, Tim.
Sweet. So I've got two questions for you. You were talking about going in too low at a position and then going to another company and them not wanting to go more than 10%. It's none of the new company's business of what you got paid the year prior. So how can they use that as a negotiating tactic? Like they don't
They'll
know
ask,
what you got paid.
they'll ask for your W-2.
They can do that?
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
I
Yep.
guess they can ask for it, and that tells you what you need to know about their culture, and then you can make your decision
Absolutely.
there.
The other thing to realize though is now remember, most of my career is focused on sales, and salespeople have an interesting relationship with the truth, right?
Mhm.
So it's very possible that it's much more prevalent in sales facing organizations because remember, a big chunk of sales compensation is variable. A lot of times you'll get a salary of 80K, but you make 200 because you got commissions. So that's why it's much more common in sales roles or sales adjacent roles to be asked for proof of your previous income, because otherwise people have a tendency to inflate to get their numbers up. But the other thing is, remember, the hiring process in the companies often has very little relationship to their actual culture. You'll hear that a lot, that well they were jerks to me in the hiring process, they're probably going to be jerks to me when I'm working there. Well, everybody is jerks to everybody in the hiring process. There are very few companies that have a terrific hiring process because remember, that's one of the parts of the company that costs money. And so often, any part of the company that costs money, whether it's legal, finance, HR, operations that don't create the product, those are cost centers, and we spend as little as we can on them. Things that make the money company are the people who sell, the people who build the product, the people who deliver the service. They get a lot more money spent on them. So it's just something to think about when you are impacting the formal hiring process of most companies. None of them work. They are all broken. And so don't necessarily give up on a great opportunity just because the hiring process is bad. Talk to some people who are in the department you want to work for about the culture there before you give up. So you had another question.
Yeah, and then my other question is like kind of in line with some of the other questions that have been asked, but not underselling yourself. I'm a combat controller in the Air Force, so in special operations, a lot of my skills are hard to translate. They're ambiguous. They're not well defined. So I've struggled with, translating that into target career fields and stuff like that. So just wondering if you had any advice for that.
Please do me a favor and click on the link that's in the document. It'll take you to an interrogation I did with ChatGPT about an hour ago over the 11 Bravo career field in the Army. A good friend of mine was in infantry, and he had a similar thing that so much of it is just, and in that, the important thing about that recorded chat is something you need to watch about the way I had to coach the AI. Because the AI wants you to be happy. So it'll say, here are the 20 requirements to be in that career field from the military occupational specialty, the definition of the job. It'll say, here are the 20 things. And your temptation is to say, thanks, because most people use AI as I ask you a question, you give me an answer. But you then have to follow up that answer with another question that takes it deeper. So when you look at the chat I did, notice it got me all the way to the end. It's like, okay, are you ready to start applying for training and development jobs as a former infantry person in the military? And I'm like, no, training and development doesn't pay anything. I want to talk about this higher level job that pays 3 times as much that I'm also qualified for with those skills. And so then you'll notice at the end, I say, okay, great. I should be going for an alliance manager job. What certifications and experience are necessary to really have a shot at that? So in your particular case, use AI and never just use one AI platform. Start with ChatGPT, go to Claude, go to X. Right now, most of them are free. So, use away and use it not so much to make decisions for you, but to look between disparate things and help you connect them in a way that you can talk about. Because I'll tell you the truth. I have worked with, so one of the people I was in the military with was a bomb loader. She was the one who loaded the bombs on the airplane. And she left the military, ended up as a baggage handler because she thought the most important skill from her job was being able to work on a flight line. Wrong. Most important skill was being able to load something hazardous that any mistake in the process could result in death and destruction all around you. So she should have been a hazardous materials person making 4 times as much as a baggage loader. But she picked the wrong essential skill from her previous job in the military and focused on it. So whenever you're asking AI for help, keep training it to which of those skills is valued more highly in that industry group in the civilian world. And then let it kind of recalibrate from that. Does that help?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. And you can copy that entire chat. So if you'll click on the link, it goes into ChatGPT, and then it brings it up, and it's not editable. But you can copy that, dump it into a chat, and say, hey, this is it for an infantry person. My military occupational specialty, or the Air Force, we had some AFSC, was this. Please do the same process for that code, and then let it take off. See what it comes up with. Cool. All right. Other questions?
I don't see any right now. We might have some more pop up as we keep going.
No worries. So the last point off the quick hits, and you see why I had to send you the document? Because there's 4 pages here. I just threw the things that are usually the most controversial. This is a big one. Network outside of veteran circles. Now, I have a really good friend, and I have a really good friend who went to Yale. He is so proud that he went to Yale. And he only networks with other people who went to Yale. He would not give the time of day to somebody who went to the University of Central Florida. So the challenge for him is his total addressable market is only that big because he only talks to people who are already inside his comfort zone. So the thing, when I'm working with my clients, whether they are executives or engineers or other, is networking in something that, frankly, you're the oddball. You have no business being there. Some of the best deals I've ever gotten were because I went to networking groups that had nothing necessarily to do with me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you know, if you're not Latino, you go to a Latinos in business thing. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is if you aren't trading just on your veteran identity, then it opens the door to a non-veteran related conversation. Then they're treating you like a civilian. They're treating you like you already kind of belong. And so whether it's a cycling group or a gaming club or something like that, don't hesitate to join something. And so the ratio I tend to do with my clients is no more than 50% of your networking should be inside your comfort zone. If you're talking to people who already know what you're talking about, you're narrowing too much of your possible introductions. Because remember, in any networking event, and I've been to hundreds, 1% of the people at that event can help you. 99% can't do a thing for you. They don't know who you are. They don't care. They don't know anybody. But 100% can introduce you to someone who can help. The expression I use in sales is everybody has a brother-in-law. That's why I'm never mean to anyone, because the person I'm mean to today is probably related to the vice president I'm selling to tomorrow. So you have to think about it in terms of, I'm not trying to convince people at this networking event to hire me. That's not your goal. Your goal is to get them to make an introduction to someone they know who can help you. So if you think about it more as I'm educating than I'm convincing, for a lot of people, that makes networking a lot easier. I'm listening to their story. I'm telling them my story. Go into every networking conversation, both online and in person, and all of you should be networking with each other. Y'all should be obsessive about connecting with each other on LinkedIn and networking back and forth, because I would be willing to bet somewhere in this 60 plus odd person class, somebody knows the person who can hire you. 100% bet.
I have a question on that, Stephen. Oh, sorry. You said to go outside of your comfort zone on that. For me, that seems obviously very uncomfortable. Like, I network with veterans because that's what I know. I know I have something in common with them. What advice do you have for us to kind of start that, to get out there and start doing that?
Start with a hobby. Start with something that you feel passionate about and you feel credible on. And then the beautiful thing about LinkedIn or other sort of social media platforms is there are groups for just about anything. When I decided to leave tech and go into the game industry, I'd been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 12. And so, it was easy for me to reach out to other people who had that similar background. Had nothing at all to do with being a chief operating officer, had everything to do with I've been playing the game longer than you've been alive. So it was just it was a way to build a bridge. And then from those first couple of things that you have a solid affinity for, that will teach you that people are people. And you can go, the thing to remember is go and ask people about themselves. If you ever feel uncomfortable or you feel out of place and you're talking to somebody, ask them a question about themselves. Ask them a question about their background. Ask them what they think of the event. Just because people believe that if you ask them a question, you're smarter. They will believe that a lot faster than if you try to impress them with your background. There's a really old statement about that where this woman goes to dinner with two different British prime ministers. The first one, she said, I was talking to him and I suddenly believed he was the most interesting person in the world. The next night, she went to dinner with the other prime minister and she said, he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. And that was just night and day in terms of the difference. So when you're networking, your job is to educate and ask questions. If you're talking too much, you're not networking, you're preaching. Does that work?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that advice. People like to answer questions and hear about themselves. We are all inherently selfish. Not in a bad way, but
you have to be. I mean, that's the key. We learn that very early on in life. So a few other things, and I'm just going to go into the depth because I've already touched on a lot of the stuff in this document. One of the things I really advise is we all go after Fortune 500 companies because they're big, they're a big target, there are a lot of jobs there that seem to be what we could do. Most of the job growth is in smaller companies. So what that means is if you would be going for a company like Dell, look at a company like ST Micro. If you're going for a job at Intel, go for a job at MIPS or NXP Semiconductors. So don't just limit yourself to giant corporations because the smaller the company is, the more likely they are to listen to you about your background, to listen to your stories. Still doesn't mean you're going to get through. I love that y'all are putting your LinkedIn connections up here because that's perfect. You should be connecting with each other. And there are two things on LinkedIn. Please, by all means, connect with me as well. My LinkedIn is at the top of the document. Two things about LinkedIn, though. A lot of us have y'all already talked about follow versus connect?
A little bit, but we'd love to hear more on it.
The key is whenever you follow somebody, that's great, but that doesn't give you access to the people I know. Go into the little hamburger thing, go in, hit connect, write a little note, because then you can see that somebody you want to talk to is a first or second order contact from me. And so connect with each other. But when you follow somebody, now sometimes, like case in point, I followed Michael Dell. I'm not connected to Michael. So if somebody's like tier S, don't necessarily try to connect. Although frankly, I taught a class in college at the university the other day. 80 people in the class, 78 connected, and find that bravery because the worst thing that can happen is they leave you on red. Okay, that's cool. So the key is if you've never read the four agreements, the author's last name is Ruiz. One of the important parts of the four agreements is don't make assumptions. Don't assume they're too important to connect with you. They're not. The other one that I love is don't take things personally. If somebody doesn't connect with you, 9 times out of 10 is they haven't looked at LinkedIn since the last time they needed to get a job.
Yep.
And that was a few years ago. So don't necessarily get your feelings hurt. Now, if anybody here doesn't link with you, go ahead and get your feelings hurt. But if anybody that you're going for a job from, one of the things that I really do, and I haven't applied for a job in a minute. I did the other day because I wanted to be in this space company. It looked cool to me. But I reached out to not only the recruiter, but I could see from the chatter on their LinkedIn page who did what. And so don't hesitate to, and don't Don't start your connections with, I'm trying to get a job at your company. I need help. Because then you sound like the scout in Up. You know, it's like, I am from this, I do that. Ask them a question about their company. Hey, I noticed that you're doing this. That's exciting to me. Where can I learn more? Boom. They'll look at that and they're not thinking this person wants something from me. They're thinking this person wants to learn more.
Mhm.
Suddenly, you're more interesting because you're asking them a question. All right, so this is all into point 6, which is where I found my sweet spot. Yes, I worked for Fortune 100 companies because that gave me much bigger bags of Legos to play with. The thing is, those big companies really need to put you in a box because that's how they avoid getting sued. The smaller companies are more willing to take a chance. A lot of us from our military experience are Swiss Army knives. We can do a lot of different stuff. The challenge is Swiss Army knives aren't generally respected. There's an old line from science fiction that specialization is for insects. The trouble is we live in a very specialized world. And so it's one of the reasons I say, if you could choose between 3 different jobs and you'd be equally happy doing all 3, ask yourself 2 things. Which one pays the most? But what will I have to pay for it? And what does that mean? Best job I ever had was VP level over this giant territory, 60 countries. I traveled 80% of the time. I had a 4-year-old when I got that job. And then I lost my wife to cancer. Suddenly I'm a single parent of a 5-year-old traveling 80% of the time. They could have tripled my money and it wasn't worth it for me anymore.
Mhm.
So really ask yourself, okay, of these 3 jobs, this one pays the most. Then why does it pay the most? If it pays the most because it's more valuable, great, go for it. If it pays the most because it's a crappy job, ask yourself about the other 2. All right, so that's 6, kind of where I found my sweet spot. One thing to be careful of, a lot of us join startups right out of the military. And that's cool because startups do value the Swiss Army knife. The trouble with startups is a lot of them don't have money. So, I mean, they really don't have money. I mean, it's 3 people and a dream. So that's cool. If you leave the military and you get a cool job at a startup, that's great. But remember, 90+% of startups fail. So keep looking. The old thing at Apple used to be that you are only as secure as the strength of your resume, the strength of your skills. And so that's the thing you have to be thinking about. Whatever job you get first out of the military, do not plan on being there for 4 to 6 years. You didn't sign a 4-year commitment to them, and they sure didn't sign a 4-year commitment to you. So be willing to take a job, especially if you think about the earlier things I said. Take the right job at the level you want to be at so you don't put yourself backwards. But then keep looking, because a lot of companies, the last person who came in hasn't learned enough yet. So if they have to downsize, the last person who came in is often the first person who goes back out. So don't stop job hunting just because you found the one, and keep the networking up. That's the most crucial thing. And look around for people around you to help, because the more people you're helping, the more people know your name and will refer to you to people who can. It's the reason I don't charge for working with veterans, because I believe in y'all. I'm grateful for your service. And I remember my situation, but all of you know somebody and you might say, hey, that guy's really smart at sales. You ought to talk to him. Or that guy's really good at running companies. You ought to talk to him. So lead with value, give a lot of stuff away, and you'll find that the calls start coming in.
I love that. I want to get Chris's question in because I know he's driving home from his VA appointment. So,
Cool.
hey, Chris.
Hey, Stephen, how you doing today?
I'm good,
Yep,
Chris,
just
thanks.
I had a VA appointment, and I'm driving back. It's like an hour away, so that's why I'm in my vehicle. But you kind of sparked my mind when you started talking about the whole conversationalist piece. The difference in how people kind of perceive you based on conversation. I can't remember where I heard this at, but they say if you want to be like the best conversationalist in the world, make it a challenge to say the least. You want to have the other person talking the most. And so like when you're engaging in those conversations with people, it doesn't mean like, I don't know if you guys are Parks and Recreations fans or not, but I'm not saying do a Ron Swanson where you answer all their questions with a question. But what I'm saying is, answer their question, but be brief and try to re-engage them and ask open-ended questions to get them speaking. And 9 times out of 10, people go, man, that was like the best conversation I ever had. And it's because you didn't really say much and you got them talking, because most people want to have that. Most people want that opportunity to be able to talk and stuff. So making it a challenge. It's kind of fun. I've done that game before with people to see how far I could push it. And it's kind of fun if you kind of go in with that mentality of like, how do I get them talking more and me talking less? It can be a fun game if you actually play it, and it works really well.
That's a terrific point, especially in networking events. It can be difficult in a formal job interview because the whole point is they want you talking. But even there, you can get them talking. Case in point, people would interview with me as a VP. VPs love to hear ourselves talk. Oh my God, we could have a great conversation and you say 2 words and I think you're the smartest person ever because I got to listen to myself for 45 minutes, right? But yeah, I think that the thing to think about is in a networking event, you're there for 2 reasons. You're there to learn about everybody around you, but you're also there to educate them about who you are and what you're looking for so they can introduce you to somebody. So that is a great place to challenge yourself. There's a tool you can use. I know Fathom does it. I don't know if Firefly does it or not. It's one of those AI agents who watches you during a call. Fathom has this feature that I hate on Toast. At the end of the call, it says, hey, did you know you talk 72% of the time? Oh, and you monologued. They define monologue as you talk more than a few minutes without breathing or giving the other person a chance to say anything. And so it'll tell you at the end, you monologued 3 times and you talked 72% of the time. That to me wasn't a good call, especially in sales. But I get excited and I start talking. Same thing at networking events. So that is a terrific point, Chris. Thank you. So any other questions before I wrap up?
I actually have one before you kind of say your closing statement. Somebody put a comment in the chat and it kind of prompted my thought. They said that I'm good at a million things, but not exceptional at anything, which I disagree with. I think everyone in this room has one thing that they are exceptional at. What's your advice for someone who hasn't found that yet, who's the jack of all trades, but they haven't found that one thing to specialize in?
Oh, that's
Sorry to call you out.
That is my entire life. So it's easy for me to answer. This is going to sound sarcastic, and I do not mean it that way. But if you can choose from 10 things you could do, ask yourself, okay, I need to pay the mortgage. Which ones do that? Okay, good. I've got 4 that people value enough to pay me enough that I can live. Which one of those do I want to do the most right now? Because remember, in the civilian world, they're not promising you a job for 20 years. So you don't owe them 20 years of service. You can change your mind. So one of the things that I do when I have 3 21-year-old sons, I tell them your early jobs are all about creating more options, more things you can do later, more things you can claim later, realistically. And then later, once you've had an exposure to all the different things, then you start narrowing. Because you're leaving the military where you know the culture, you know the scenario, and you're going into just the unknown. And so the thing to think about is, remember, you might be underplaying yourself. You're not exceptional at anything. Well, maybe you're not exceptional because you're in the military, and none of us feel like we're exceptional because we're surrounded by exceptional people. All right. You get out in the civilian world, you look around, you're like, okay, A, nobody's in charge here. And B, nobody seems to know what they're doing. And suddenly you realize, okay, I think I've got my stuff more figured out than a lot of the people around me. So that's the thing I will tell you. You will be surprised because the thing I say all the time is the reason I was able to negotiate with Nobel Prize winning scientists at 26 years old was because the military didn't care whether I could or not. They gave me the tasking and I either did it right or I went to jail. Hugely motivating, so I think nobody in the civilian world understands that. And it's one of the reasons why we struggle to connect with them sometimes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to kind of pinpoint that. It caught my eye in the chat, and so I just wanted you to say a word on it. Thank you.
It is a really terrific point. I think to close up, and I'm happy to stay on as long as y'all want. I know you've got another speaker coming in, and I'm happy to answer questions. But on the last page of the document I sent out, The number 4, leading with curiosity. You are going to be really tempted to get very frustrated with the civilian culture. Because remember, you're coming from a culture of mission, where it is accomplishing the goal that's important. Civilian companies don't really lead with a sense of mission. If you've never watched a Simon Sinek video, Sinek, he has a TED Talk called Finding Your Why, WHY. And it is amazing to me that civilian companies need to be told that. Creating a sense of mission, understanding a sense of mission. But that's the culture you come from. Example, I had a class last night where I'm teaching people who are going from B2B, business to business sales, into business to government sales. And I told them, you're going to tell the government, I'm going to give you 50% off. And the government doesn't care. Because, and the cynic says, well, because the government spends too much. Not at all. Government thinks about mission. Companies think about profit. You can tell a business, I'll save you 50%, and they hear the cash register dinging because they just made more money. Good. In government, it's all about mission. So instead of saying, I'll save you 50%, I say you can create double the mission for the same amount of money. You can put double the number of milk cartons onto kids' trays. You can drop double the number of bombs. You can do double the amount of work, create double the amount of value in the mission for the same money inside your budget. And that sells. So that gives you an idea of the difference in mindset between the two. So really think when you are going and you're applying for jobs, especially in smaller companies. Because remember, the larger a company gets, the more it starts to resemble the government in terms of bureaucracy. The smaller companies, which is where a lot of your value can be perceived, think in terms of what of those 10 Swiss Army knife skills do I have that actually helps that company make money, helps that company achieve their goals. And that's the one you lead with because that's the one they'll pay the most for. So then the last thing I'll say about networking, it's number 5 on the last page of the document, is don't hesitate to reach out virtually. So many people on LinkedIn are getting spammed with, once I got the COO title, I suddenly had thousands of new friends in India and the Philippines who wanted to sell me programming. So LinkedIn is very noisy. It's very clogged. The best way to connect with somebody is not to send a connection right away. The best way to connect with somebody is start commenting intelligently on their comments, on their postings. So there are a lot of people, because I'm an industry analyst, who will comment on my postings, and that's great. The only challenge is they're not always getting the posting. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take their original posting on LinkedIn, dump it into AI. Then I'll take what I want to write, dump it into AI. And I'll tell the AI, think as an expert with 11 years of experience as the chief financial officer of a bank and tell me whether that's a sensible comment. And then a lot of times AI will come back and say, I know that sounds like a sensible comment, but you could improve it here, here, and here. AI is not doing the thinking for you. AI is giving you a critique. But use that ability to reach out to people, especially if you're stationed somewhere and you're moving somewhere else. Start building the relationships virtually. Do not wait to get there, because then you're going to spend months trying to go to events and miss a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. I really, really appreciate your comment. I really appreciate that you took what you said last time and all the questions and comments that you had last time, and you spoke more on kind of what they asked. So we really, really appreciate that. You came back with more knowledge that everyone needed. So thank you so much.
Happy to be here. And by all means, please, when you fill out feedback, whatever, if there's something you want me to cover more next time, please drop it in, because this document gets better. And honestly, you can go back to this document in a couple of months. It will have changed. It's the same document. I just change it every time. So.
All right. We can't wait to see what you have to bring next time. Thank you so much.